everyone. Happy Tuesday. Y'all know I call it Terrific Tuesdays, so happy Terrific Tuesdays. Come on in. Do people still say that? Do people still say the come on in thing? I don't know. Just say hi to me so I can know you're here. Cause y'all know I don't like sitting there talking about myself. How y'all been today? How has your weekend been? How has, did you do something nice for yourself? Did you, at least cook you something nice? I don't know. You know, I'm a I'm big on doing something nice for yourself, because let me tell you, when you stop doing things nice for yourself, when you stop doing the self-care, everything feels harsh. Everything feels like everybody's taking, and it's because you don't replenish your cup. So I'm huge on that. So I hope y'all had a good weekend. I hope that you were productive, or if you're too productive, I'm hoping that you were not, and that you got you some rest. Hey sis, how are you? Girl, my little thing just fell. Sheesh. You haven't done anything. Nice. Listen, Kiana, we're going to change that. Don't worry. Soon enough. Hey, Mom, how are you? It's a great twice weekly show to check out. Yeah, listen, I'm gonna do that. I'm going to actually look into that. Because y'all know I really feel sincere about the whole the whole self-care thing. Hey, Tanisa, how are you? All right, so I'm not going to hold y'all up. This is going to be a short show today. That's the goal. I just wanted to talk about one of my favorite words. And I think you guys, if you've been around me a little bit, you know in the last, a few months, one of my favorite words is boundaries. Boundaries. I absolutely love that word. I honestly did not, when you first hear the word boundaries, it sounds negative, right? It has a negative connotation, right? And so I won't tell you what I think you already know about it. I'll just kind of come from a clean slate. Boundaries. When you hear it, you really kind of think that, it has everything to do with you pushing people away and saying, this is like my box, you stay at your side, I stay on my side. And it sounds and it feels really permanent. It feels really harsh. And it feels like it could almost be like you pushing people away. And I think that's either what you feel sometimes, and it can be what the other person might feel as well. Hey, Kanisha. Hey, JC. I actually feel that that's, again, how we understand definitions is how we react to it. So if those are all the things you think about boundaries, and naturally so in a sense, like if someone said a boundary to you, that's what you naturally think of. You start to think of like fences and just, parameters, just like marking a thing off. Hey, Tracy. Hey, girl. So I want to kind of dispel the myth around boundaries and why we think they're bad. I think if I want to give a proper definition, and I give my own definitions. I can look it up in Webster or whatever, but I don't think that does me justice. I'm going to tell you what a boundary is literally just, a stop and a start. I think I want to say that. I think that if you think of a boundary as a fence, it's not a bad thing, right? It's just a layer of protection around you and around each person. So let's assume everybody has boundaries. This is something that we don't talk about, because the reality is everybody should have boundaries, right? And whether or not you know you have boundaries, there are boundaries between every relationship. I'm going to say that again. There are boundaries in every relationship. So even if you don't feel like you believe that you have boundaries, there are boundaries. The difference is if you don't make the time to define them, somebody has defined them for you. I'm gonna say that again. If you don't take the time to define your boundaries in your relationships, that means the other person has defined them for you. Because you didn't put any rules down. You didn't say this is how we're going to interact. This is how we deal. And a lot of times people just kind of go with the flow, and then they wonder, it's not a problem until they feel like a boundary was crossed. And a lot of times it's because a boundary was never set. Or if the boundary was set, it wasn't set with their knowledge. Okay? So that's where we want to talk about today. We're talking about why boundaries is not a bad, that's not the B word. It's not a bad word. It is actually a very good thing. And we're going to talk about it so much so that everybody in your life is going to know why you have boundaries, why you're enforcing your boundaries, and why you enforcing your boundaries will help them as well. Right? I know you didn't even think you're going to get into this today, right? So Tracy said, learning and making use of boundaries has changed my life for the better. Absolutely, Tracy. I am 100% with you there. When I realized that boundaries were not a bad thing, it really changed the way I view everything. Hey, Lynn, girl. So let's get into this. So if you think about it that way, that everybody has boundaries, every relationship has a boundary, right? If you have, if you have these two houses next to each other, there's always a property line. That's the boundary, right? And depending on how structures go, a property could be built over the boundary line or not. Regardless, there's always a line. Whether you know where it is or whether you don't know, that's a thing, right? And when I got the deeds to my house, they told me, hey, these are your boundary lines, and you need to know that just in case there are any disputes later, so you can know where your property starts and where your property ends. Okay, so y'all know I love my metaphors, so let's talk about it. I'll give you a good example. When you raise kids, right? Okay, the first thing that people tell you about is like, no one has to even tell you. Let's go there. When you have a 3-year-old, maybe when they're starting to be vocal and they starting to assert what they want in life and what they desire, a lot of times they say, hey, I want this. And as a parent, we have to say no, or we have to say not right now. And a lot of times we think we're just, giving consequences, but most times it is us putting up a boundary. Especially when you have they're getting be preteens and they're getting the age. Kids' job is to push the limits so they can know what the boundaries are. That's oftentimes what they're doing. I want to know how far I can go. And once I know how far I can go, I know where I'm supposed to stay in. And it's important to them. Matter of fact, so much so that when you give in to a child and you give them everything that they want or they think they want, you really are doing them an injustice because you're letting them know there are no boundaries. You literally can do what you want. And therefore, they're a little confused because that's why they continue to push, because they really would like a boundary set. Hey, Cousin Marilyn. Hey, Deborah. Hey, Natalie. So in that, I think every relationship has a point where a boundary is tested. And again, if you don't set a boundary in your relationships, it's just going to happen like that. You're going to not realize that there's a boundary until you actually hit a moment where you feel like, wait a minute, a line was crossed. And a lot of times it's too late. It's not too late, but it's one of those things where you know how I talk about invisible expectations, right? I don't like those. I don't like where there's an expectation on a role. I don't like there to be an expectation on a gender. I don't like there to be an expectation on a type of person where like, oh, I expect these things to happen, and nobody has ever verbalized that the expectation exists, and therefore there's a lot of offense that can happen and feelings get hurt and all type of other thoughts. I'm all about clarity and communication. And clarity in communication, right? So if we talk about boundaries up front, it's a good thing just to define how we're going to operate in this space. And you're saying, Paris, like, this sounds like it's just above my head. Are you trying to sound all crazy? Well, let me give you an easy example. So when you start dating somebody, let's say you just met somebody, when you just meet them, the first thing for most people, when you meet them, they can't just, you're not saying, hey, come to my house. That's usually not the very first thing you say when you first meet somebody, right? You usually say, oh, let's talk on the phone. Let's text. Let's try to get to know each other a little bit. Let's ask some questions and have conversations to see if we even want to take this any further. Then maybe let's meet somewhere for coffee or to get a bite to eat that is in a public place. Let's do that a few times. Let's talk a bit more. Let's even figure out if we want to do like a group dating type of thing. There are steps to it. And so you generally don't step from step 1 to like 5. So when somebody comes and they say, hey, I just met you, let me go to your house. A lot of times red flags pop up like, whoa, 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 whoa. That's not okay, because that's not how it goes. And usually that's a boundary that somebody crossed that you have, right? And again, it's probably not articulated because you think, oh, this is how dating works. They should never do that. And, and then you'll say it's a red flag. And let's be clear, I believe that it is. However, I think when you start to seriously date someone, there should be a conversation about what your boundaries are. Emotionally, physically, financially, mentally. I don't think people want to think about this. People think it's all too much, but I think if you have clarity, then you don't leave rooms for misunderstandings. Don't get me wrong, we can always have a misunderstanding, but I believe when you define things up front, when you set the boundaries up front, there's not a need to come from behind like, wait, it makes things a lot clearer, okay? And I believe that a boundary is not always a no. A boundary is this is where I'm comfortable at. This is where I need to be here. And then let's operate within this box. And then if we don't like these boundaries, we can discuss it. But this is where I'm comfortable at. That's where I think you need to come at from there. Kiana, yes, there are levels to this. There are levels to this. There are certainly levels here. And like you said, with the romance thing, you have to be super careful because, again, there are people who have different places where they think this is okay. And instead of being completely offended, at least you can know, okay, hey, this is where I'm at. And they can say, hey, this is where I'm at. And then we can say, hey, this is if we're going to proceed or not, right? Deborah, you said learning that boundaries feel so healthy. Yes, the reality is whether or not you set them, they're there. And that's what was the funniest thing to me. Hey, Latera, the funniest thing was me is that I did not realize that if I didn't set boundaries, that they're still there. That took me aback. It really did, because to me, I don't like, if anybody knows me, I had control issues for a long time. I'm working through those. I won't say they're all gone, but I am working through them. But I had control, issues. So for me to know that there was a boundary set in my relationships and I didn't have any say, it really ticked me off, right? And so I said, well, what can I do to get back control of that? And so, I went to try to learn more about it. You said, don't call me after 9 p.m., respect my decision. Absolutely. That's the perfect example of one, right? I prefer not to. And I don't care what you like, and I don't care what your situation is. I think we deal with a lot of offense. And the reality is we cannot take that into matters when we decide what makes us comfortable or not. Just like you said about not calling me after 9. What if somebody says, well, that's just when I get a chance to do it. And your thing is you might have to get up for work at 3 a.m. And you're going to be sitting up talking all night and tired and not good at work because they can't switch something around in their schedule. While I can understand them saying, well, this is what works best for me, your boundary is still what it is, and it works for you because, again, this is how you need to operate in your life. So if they want to fall into your life, if they want to be in relationship with you, then they need to adapt and recognize and acknowledge your boundary. And guess what? You don't have to change your boundary just because they're not comfortable. That's gonna hurt some of y'all feelings. Y'all gonna be like, wait. What do you mean? Because I mean, shouldn't we compromise? Yes, compromise is absolutely necessary in a lot of relationships. But what people don't do is they make things such a vague, big theory, and they don't really define things. Compromise is necessary in every relationship, but compromise doesn't have to happen with everything. If I have a boundary, I set that boundary, and whether or not you think it's a realistic thing or not, I set it for a reason. And so if I choose not to change my boundary, it doesn't mean I'm being mean. It doesn't mean I'm uncompromising. It doesn't mean that I don't want to be in a relationship with you. It just means this is the boundary that I'm comfortable with, so let's work around it. Vice versa, if somebody has a boundary that you don't like, just because you don't like it, it does not invalidate their boundary. Just like we tell little girls to say no when somebody touches them the wrong way. You have the right to say a boundary too. I don't care. If somebody says, well, I really wasn't trying to do anything to them, I don't care. If I feel like it's wrong, I don't want you to touch me. Don't touch me. I would tell my daughter that. Heck, I tell my son that. I've told him that since he was little. If somebody touches you and you don't like it, say no and say it loudly. And I will back up whatever you decide there, because you know what felt right and what didn't. That's just one example of a boundary. But if we look at it that way, maybe you'll see that you don't have to feel bad. Everybody's not going to like. Usually people who don't like your boundaries are the ones who don't operate within boundaries. Boop, 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 boop. I'm going to pin that up right there. Y'all see the pen? Usually the ones that have issues with your boundaries are people who don't like to operate within a boundary. They're used to just doing everything and then just sticking to the wall. That's usually the ones who have a problem. And you can't live your life by them, because if they had a chance, they would tear down all your boundaries and really want to redefine one. They just don't want to have anything that they have to go by. Let me read some more of the comments. Y'all know I don't like talking myself. Leah, you say, yes, setting boundaries at the beginning tells people a lot about what you are willing to put up with. Yeah, I believe if you walk into this thing with boundaries and say, hey, this is how I operate here, even though somebody might see that as being pushy, I think it's being very clear and concise. And it doesn't mean it's not some room for compromise. It's just saying, hey, this is how I operate, or this is what I notice about me, or maybe this is how I operate in this season. Because I do think boundaries are conditional sometimes, right? I might say right now, this is what works for me. And then over this season, it can change. And that's my right, because it's my boundary. Okay, keep on going. You say, I feel like if a person struggles in this area, when we're out, have other people around and hang out with you guys so it won't be any slip-ups. With dating, absolutely. Especially when you're dating and you're trying to stay and keep a certain standard, I absolutely believe you have to set those boundaries, set yourself up for success. You don't want to put yourself in a position that can lead you to compromise. Because a lot of times we set boundaries, and guess what we do? That's a really good point. We overstep our own boundaries. Like if I tell you I don't want to go this way in a relationship, and then you go ahead and you kind of seduce me of sort, or get me kind of holding my hand, and now I have these feelings, and now I'm doing things that I said I didn't want to do. It's oftentimes us stepping over our own boundary, and it makes things very funky, because now I know I said this is my boundary, but now my feelings cause me to go over it, and it's going to end in regret, because I didn't want to go there in the first place. I just didn't have in that moment enough self-discipline not to go there. Right? Let's see, Lynn, you said when people ignore your boundaries, it tells you how much they want to control you. Absolutely. If I say, hey, this is what I'm comfortable with and this is what I'm not comfortable with, and people have a problem with that, I don't want to say red flag, but I'm going to say it's going to be a magenta flag. Yeah, magenta. It's magenta. Okay, that flag is going to be magenta, ma'am. Because, you really have to be really think about what they're saying. They're saying, I don't respect what you say and your desires in this moment and your wants and your needs. And so therefore I'm going to force my agenda or force my boundaries on you. And I'm going to just require you to just kind of adapt. I need to say it like that so you guys can get it. Because I think a lot of times people don't set boundaries because of guilt. People don't set boundaries because they think that means that they're not a nice person. People don't set boundaries because they worry about what the other person thinks. People don't set boundaries because they don't want to be seen as the mean person. Y'all know we care about what people think way too much. I care about what people think, but not to the point where it's going to wreck my peace, and not to the point where anymore. Because this was my problem. Let's be clear. You know, I'm always going to talk about how I went through something first, and then what I learned to get on the other side of it. I'm not perfect in this. I still struggle with setting boundaries sometimes, but I'm so much better. And I learn. Y'all know what I feel. Your yes can't even be trusted if your no is not solid. I don't trust your yes unless I've heard a no. If you're a person to say yes to everything, I don't really trust it, because I don't know what you even like. You say yes to every single thing. Do you know how to say no? What do you really like to do? What don't you want to do? I feel that way. I'm learning that about me and other people. It's just something I'm observing. Don't even tell me yes yet until I know. I just don't trust it. I'll say, okay, that person's saying yes. I don't really know if that's the things you like yet. If that's is that really you? So many people say yes just because they think that's what the other person wants to hear. And then now they don't have an identity because it's contingent on the relationship with you. I tell people all the time, please don't say yes to me just because you think it's what I want to hear. Say it because it's what you want to do. Because then don't blame me for how you feel later. I should have known. I don't know anything. I only know what you tell me. And I only know what you tell me if you're being honest with me. See how many layers to this is, right? I told y'all stuff is not 1 and 2 dimensional. It's 3, 4, 5 dimensional. Really. So we need to get deep into it and deep dive into it. And the best thing is to be as clear as possible from the beginning. Leah, you said, right, it means I love myself and I value our relationship. Absolutely. Absolutely. Setting boundaries says I love me and I value our relationship. So let me set these boundaries now so that we won't have any misunderstandings. And so we're clear. You say you touch me, get ready to meet Jesus, right? Okay. Let's see. People who hate boundaries also hate structure. Lynn, you already know we on the same page here. If you don't like boundaries, it's because I'm not used to structure. I don't want any rules. I hear people all the time say, I hate it when people say this about entrepreneurship. I want to quit my job I want to be an entrepreneur so I don't have to ever answer to anybody again. When I hear people say that, I'm like, well, that's not going to last long. You know what? If you don't want to work, if you want to be an entrepreneur because you don't want to work for somebody else, I know you think that sounds okay. But really what I hear, and a lot of times you let people talk enough, they'll tell you exactly what it is that I honestly have a problem with authority that was not resolved in my younger years. And it spilled over into my adulthood. And so I don't want anybody to say anything to me because I'm a rebel and I don't like structure. And therefore, I think that when I go into entrepreneurship, it's going to be different. Sorry, that's what I hear. Prove me wrong. Lynn, you said, can I say this? A lot of, ooh, Lynn, come on, girl. Listen, you getting spicy in here. You said a lot of the H word, because I know my mama might be on here, are simply people who do not know how to say no, AKA lack sexual boundaries. 100% correct. And one day y'all gonna hear my full testimony, because I believe a lot of people they have the sexual boundary issues. And we don't want to talk about it because it seems so horrible. And don't let you be saved or anything or a Christian. You know, people really act like you could never have had a past or have never struggled with anything. I'll just be the first one without going into it. I have struggled with that. And that's what it is. People pleasing. I have said yes to things when I didn't know how to say no. It wasn't that I wanted to do it. I didn't know how to say no. Sometimes it's like I don't even want to use the word peer pressure, but sometimes it's like the fear of rejection. You fear that if you say no, that person won't like you anymore. You fear that they won't be with you. And if you have issues with loneliness, and if you are already dealing with identity, and if you already have other issues that stem from rejection, it's super easy to not know how to say no to those type of things. Lynn, remind me, that's going to be a whole nother live. We need accountability partners. They're awesome. Yes, I 100% believe in accountability partners, and not just in your love life, but in every part of your life. We need them for every piece and part. We'll talk about that another day. Let's see. Hey, Dre, what's up? Yeah, so that's, I definitely think that, when we start talking about setting boundaries, I'll give you some examples of what we want to do in our friendships. So, for example, if I don't know. Okay, I'll give it a friend. So let's say I'm your friend and I think it's disrespectful to date my ex. Let's say that's what I think, right? That's something I'm not comfortable with. And maybe for me, I don't care if this is my ex from 20 years ago. I don't want you to date them. Maybe that's how I feel. Now, somebody else might say, that's silly, girl. You don't even like him no more. Why do you care? Or y'all wasn't even really dating. Y'all just deal with it. If that works for me, if that's what I like, if that's something that's important to me, like if that's like what do I want to call it, a deal breaker, then I need to speak my truth, okay, up front. So if I'm dealing with a new friend and I made her and we need to have a conversation, it might not be like, okay, hey girl, guess what? Don't you talk to my ex-man. No, maybe it could be a conversation where we're talking one day and we start talking about whatever. I need to say, you know what, girl, I've heard some people, they deal with other people and people they've dealt with in the past, and that just doesn't make me comfortable. I hope you can understand that. Like that for my relationships, that doesn't make me comfortable. So I just steer clear of that. And I don't cross that line on the other way around as well. I just steer clear of it. Believe it or not, that was a boundary that was just set. It was. That was a boundary. Now, you might not agree with that boundary. You might think it's childish. You might say, oh, you just jealous, you're insecure. It don't even matter what you think, though. If that's what I said, that's what is important to me. And that means that if you meet somebody who I used to deal with, and you know for a fact I used to deal with them, if you value our relationship, you would not cross that boundary. Y'all, I couldn't think of another one at that moment. That's one, right? Other boundaries are, I think the other boundaries are being able to say what works for you. Like, let's say if you are not comfortable with loaning people large sums of money, you need to set a boundary. You need to say Bank of Paris is closed. Or Bank of Paris will only give out loans that originate in $100 or less. I just put a number out there. Who knows? Because maybe $100 is what I'm comfortable with. I'm comfortable with losing that, right? Because something like that, like, don't we know money can corrupt relationships really quickly, right? So if I don't want that to be a problem, I'm going to take that out the equation, right? If I absolutely don't want to have an issue with somebody that I'm in a relationship and I care about, hey, Kelly, I honestly will not allow it to corrupt the relationship because I'll take that factor out. And what does that mean? Either I can choose A, I don't loan money to people I love. I can say that. Or I can say B, I don't loan money, but I'll give you whatever I give you. And I just won't expect it back. Therefore, it's no expectation. Therefore, we can't mess up our relationship. Or 3, I can say, hey, if I loan you this, let's actually have a written or verbal contract because I've deemed you trustworthy prior to this. And then if we're not going to do it because that's not a big sum of money, I have a level. So for me, if I'm okay with losing $100, that means that even if you ask me to borrow it and you never pay it back, I will never be upset at you because it's $100. It's $100. Let me tell you something. That's some free game, okay? It took me a whole long time to realize that. It took me a whole long time to realize that if I didn't set those type of boundaries, I've messed up relationships. They didn't even realize it because my feelings were hurt because they didn't do what they said. I'm an integrity person. I'm a super integrity person. So if you say that you're going to do something and you don't do it for me, it used to wreck how I felt about people. And after a while, I put all the onus on them. But what do they say? The definition of insanity is you do things over and over again and you expect a different outcome. So if I know this is your pattern, for me to continue to do it, I have parts in that too, right? Let's talk about it. We don't want to talk about both sides of it. So I set up flaky boundaries. I let the people overstep my boundaries. And when they did not own up to what they did, I blamed them only. I didn't take the blame when I had weak boundaries and they had weak integrity. So guess what? Do I stop loving you because your integrity is weak? No. I just realized that's something you're working on. So instead of me being upset, if I know that, if I've had past experiences like that, then I set my boundaries so that I don't have to exit relationship with you. I can say, hey, this is what it is. So if I want to help, I'm going to set a limit on what won't hurt me. If in this, maybe your limit is $5. If somebody don't pay you $5 back, you done. That's your choice. You listen. So my point here is, I'm just giving y'all some examples of it. I did not mean to be on this long. I do have another thing to go to, but I just wanted to be very clear about that. I hope that you guys got something from this. Boundaries are necessary for every relationship. Sit down and think about your boundaries within your parental relationships, either with your parents or with your children. Think about it with your siblings. Think about it with your friends. Think about it with your spouse. Think about it with everybody around you. Because if you don't think, if you ever notice you have situations where things go out of control, like extremes, like extremely high, extremely low, it's usually a good sign that you did not have a boundary in place. And guess what? It's never too late to define one. Sometimes we say, oh, well, that's why it happened because we didn't have it. It's too late. It's not too late. You can always define the boundary. Caution though. When you define a boundary in the middle of a relationship, the person that you're defining the boundary on will not like it. I don't care how forward thinking they are. They're not going to like it. Be okay with that. It's necessary. That's like when you get a new puppy and you have to train it. That puppy not going to like that. It's going to rebel. Or when you have a kid and you're trying to teach them how to do good things, they're not going to like it at first. The first no, they're going to have a temper tantrum. Do you stop saying no because they give the temper tantrum? No, you don't. No. You stick with it. Because guess what? You're doing it for their own good. Or you're doing it for your good and overall for y'all relationships good. So when you enforce a boundary, people are not going to like it at first. It's okay. Don't stop. Do what you have to do. It is necessary. It will get better. It will get better. People who love you will adapt. People who care about you will adapt. I'm telling you, stop pouring from these empty cups and then being upset at the person that you poured all your stuff out to. There is a responsibility for you to accept your part of this. You can't be upset if you say yes every day, every time. And then, well, don't they know I'm tired? Don't they know they don't have no money? Don't they know I'm not a bank? No, they don't. Because you say yes to everything. You have no boundaries. Get you some. Get you some. I'm going to put that on the shirt. Boundaries. Get you some. Don't take my shirt idea. I promise you it's going to be on the shirt. Yeah, I'm going to put that on there. I like that. All right. I love y'all. Y'all already know what I feel. I'm going to end this out here. I'm going to end this out with saying what I always say is you are enough. You know, I really feel that way. You're enough. You're enough for me to love you, enough for God to love you, but you're enough to deserve and be worthy of being able to have good relationships. And you have good relationships by setting necessary boundaries. People that love you will respect your boundaries, okay? They will. I promise you they will. So I love y'all. Y'all have an amazing evening. Hopefully it's productive. Or if you need some rest, get you some rest. And you know, I'll be on here Thursday at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. Once again, and we're going to do this all over, okay? Love you all. Bye.